It's corset day. Actually, on this channel, that doesn't mean much because every day is corset day. And by that, I mean I am tackling a new corset project. In case you're new here to the channel, my name is Kat. I am a PhD student and I'm studying corsets. So I pretty much study corsets Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. I skipped a day there, but sometimes we need a day off. I really love corsets. I think they're a much vilified object and garment in history. And so when I'm not doing work for my PhD, I'm kind of trying to find a corset pattern for me, for my own needs and my body, because I really like corsets, but I haven't quite found the pattern that really works for me. It's like finding, the right pair of shoes that you can walk, 15,000 steps in. It's a journey. If you're interested in other corset projects on this channel, I have a whole playlist and videos about corsets, so check that out below. But today's project is slightly different. So a few months ago, I found this Etsy shop called Repeated Patterns, I think it's called on Etsy. I'll drop a link down below. But what they've done very helpfully is they've taken the original patterns included in Victorian magazines and they've scanned them and they've made them available as a PDF for you to buy. I find this very useful because I stare at those pattern diagrams and I get completely overwhelmed and I can't do anything with them. So I found it really useful to be able to use extant original patterns, but without having to do a lot of the legwork of, tracing them out and scaling them up. So I bought a pattern. It is called Corset du Matin because it's from La Mode Illustrée, which is a French magazine. And this corset is specifically for the morning. If you translate it, it's called the morning corset. And this is because Victorian clothing, specifically, was very tied to either a activity-based or time of the day based. So you had a specific set of clothing or rules for morning garments, afternoon garments, visiting garments, sports garments, much like you do today, where you've got loungewear and you've got sportswear. There's, clothing has a purpose. But it also had a time of day. And the morning is quite interesting because in broad general terms, for middle class and wealthy women, it was a time where you were sort of at home and you weren't really receiving visitors unless they were close family or friends. So you could be in what could be considered a slight more state of undressed. So you wouldn't have to be dressed as properly as if you were going outside, but you would still want to be in the fashionable silhouette or presentable. And something that is really important to remember as well is that even specifically in middle class and upper class households, even if you weren't receiving visitors, you weren't really alone because you'd have servants, household people. And so you would still want to be presentable or proper. A morning corset, in my perspective, is something that is supposed to give you the fashionable silhouette and some support without being a typical corset to go out in or do a lot of things in. And I think this can be seen in this model. So I saw this photo and I was completely intrigued because the particular thing about this corset is that it doesn't have eyelets at the back. It closes with a tab system that then ties in a bow at the front. And I thought this was insane. I thought this was amazing. I was so excited because this would make putting on and taking off a corset much faster and easier. And so I thought I would give it a go. So it seems like a fairly straightforward pattern. Well, so for context, all you get when you buy this pattern obviously are the original instructions and description included with it, which for Victorian magazines is typically very little. So you've got sort of the image, a label of the pieces, and the very, very brief making up instructions that were given. However, I've made a few corsets, so I would consider myself seasoned, so this did not put me off. This is a simple pattern in the sense that you've got a front and a back, and then you've got gussets that go into them, 2 for the hip and 2 for the bust. This pattern really intrigued me. So the plan is I'm going to be using, according to this, so in the French, it says to cut it out of coutil, which is, in case you're new to corsetry, it is a fabric kind of like a twill, but more like a herringbone kind of type fabric that is it can be very lightweight, but very, very sturdy and densely woven, which makes it really great for corsets. And it came around in the 19th century, was popularized especially for one layer corsets or as the inside layer of a fancier corset. Interestingly, the translation was to cut it out of ticking, which is a different fabric. But because I have coutil, we're going to go with coutil. I have a meter of coutil set aside. I've got some plain herringbone tape that I'm going to be using for the boning channels, and we're just going to go and do it. I've made a mock-up, and I'll talk to you about that now. So I was actually working on this last night, and I did add, so the pattern was for a smaller size than I am, and so I worked out how much I had to add, and I did add it to when I cut out the pattern, but last night after I tried it on, it seemed to be too big. So I cut off that seam allowance and I did it shorter, but I actually think that was the right decision because you can see there is quite a large gap in the back. And while that could have been fine if it was a laced corset, I think it's too wide for this style. So I'm definitely going to be adding to the side seams as I did in the original mock-up before I made some dubious late night decisions. But the other thing, otherwise I think this is an interesting design for sure. It's very comfortable. I really like it. It's like one layer, it's very roomy, but there's one thing I don't like about it, which is there is uneven support. So in corsets, what I particularly like is some solid back support. And because this only ties at the waist point, which is here, it doesn't actually provide you any hip or bust support here. So I get it, like that's the point of the corset, that it's very comfortable. And it is very comfortable, and it's less like, it's more of like a wrap around you. But I'm not sure if this will work for me. Like, I like a little bit more structure. Yeah, let's see. Okay, so I've cut out all my pieces, and I just wanted to talk you through quickly because initially this might seem like a really simple corset pattern because it technically only has 4 pieces, which are 2 fronts and 2 backs. However, this is very much more in the styles of these sort of pre-1850s shaped panelled corsets, where it's just like you've got two bits and then you shape them by adding gussets, instead of having individual panels for each of these sections, which becomes more popular towards the end of the 19th century. So it's kind of surprising to see it in this 1890s pattern. But anyway, the other interesting thing about this is that it has this, which I've never seen in a corset before. It's a pleat, and I have a few theories about this. Sort of in the 1890s, it was actually quite popular to have diagonal seams. It's something that started, I think, as early as the 1880s. Some designs were patented, they were popular, they were in exhibitions, and I'm wondering if that's the purpose of this, because otherwise it doesn't really have a purpose, does it? But you can see it's a tricky one. I'm really hoping this smooths out properly once sewn and ironed. But yeah, I just wanted to show you about this little pleat. So all I did was I marked it, I've brought it together, and then I've basted it before I top stitch it into place. And I found this through the mock-up that it was easy to do that before putting in the gussets. So that's the order of operations. I'm going to sew down the pleats, then I'm going to work on putting in the gussets. I'll show you how I do that. It's pretty simple, if repetitive, and you know, I'm still a little iffy at them, but yeah, let's go. Okay, so gusset process part 1. The first thing you have to do is to prep the slit that you're going to insert your gusset into. This is assuming it's not in a seam and it's just literally a slit in the fabric. So what I do is I go in with my iron and I very gently roll back this seam allowance. Usually it's like not included because it's a slit, but you try to get it as thinly as possible. I found that I can't really get it under 1/4 inch. That's about as much as I can do. And then it tapers off to nearly nothing at the bottom. And you can see that there is like a little bit of raw edge here at the bottom, but that's usually why this edge is reinforced by like a buttonhole stitch or a decorative stitch with some silk thread. So don't worry too much about that. You can fix anything at this point. And so that's all I've done. And then I need to take my gusset and figure out the right position, and I mark the seam allowance that is in this gusset, and then all you have to do is pin it so that the edge, the folded edge, is just on that line, and then you top stitch it into place. So let's do that. So the next step is actually to add the boning channels, and for this the pattern actually very specifically tells you to add tape. So you could have done this corset out of 2 layers and then sewn the boning channels and have the boning in that, but it very specifically tells you to add tape for the stays. Stays is the boning. It's stitched under the other pieces, so on the inside, and then all you have to really do is top stitch those into place. So here I've mapped them out, and I've stitched, so I used one wide bit of tape. In this case it's herringbone tape, not the greatest quality, but it's what I had, and then I just stitched the edges down and down the middle. But the thing I wanted to mention as well is that the pattern indicates where to start the boning at the back, which kind of looks like like this, but it doesn't tell you where it finishes on the gusset, so I kind of had to use the image. Thankfully there's a front and a back of the image included in the magazine, and you can kind of tell that the boning at the back goes over the middle of the gusset, so that's where I positioned mine. So this just needs top stitching, and then I just need to do the 2 side seams and the front and the little contraption for closing it, which I'll talk to you a little bit more about later on. I've learned a lot about about thinking before you sew on this project, but I think it's going well. So I added the last few strips of boning that I had to, which were at the center front, over the sides, and over the side seams. I think the pattern actually only asks you to fell a seam and make that into a boning channel, but I quite like the idea of doing this, so I added an extra boning channel at the side seams essentially. And then I went ahead and I put in the boning. So I'm using, basically I had to change it a little bit because of what I had in stock, and I didn't have quite wide enough steel boning for the center back here, but I had one super extra wide piece, so I've put one steel bone here that's quite wide, and then 2 thicker whalebones on either side, and this repeats on this side as well. I'm pretty happy with that, and then everything else is just lightweight, the thinnest kind of synthetic whalebone. I've cut them all to size, and now I just need to go and file down the sharp edges, then I can put them in and I can bind it, and then it should be done because there's no eyelets. This is a very, very plain, basic corset, so if I like this style I can always make a fancier one. Okay, so this corset has been hanging around my sewing room for way too long, and it's time to finish it because I keep putting it off, and I think the reason is that I'm not excited about it. It's plain, I'm not planning on doing any decoration to it, and I'm not totally sold on the design of it. I had a quick try on as soon as I finished the seams so that I could see, and I'm not too excited, but I'm still going to finish it. And there's 2 things left to do, which is I need to add a length of ribbon or tape to the end of these, because this is what overlaps over the waist and you tie it into a little bow, and I need to bind the top and the bottom. I'm going to find something suitable in the stash to finish off this uninspiring corset, and then I want to actually do a proper wear test so I can tell you how I feel about the design. Hello friends, good morning. So I just finished the corset last night. I did the binding, and then I whip stitched a little bit of this lace on just to add a little bit of interest because I really wasn't that interested in it. But this morning, it's the morning corset, and I only have some bits of sewing to do, so I thought it'd be a good time to test it out and to see how much support it really gives. I tested it out after I finished it for about half an hour to an hour, and I wasn't really impressed, but today we're going to try it for a few more hours and give it another shot. So I just wanted to show you as well what it looks like on. You can see that it's it does have a shape to it, but it's not your typical corset. And I think the issue is the closure, which is the innovative bit about it. So I'm a bit disappointed in that. But just to show you, I'm not wearing any other support undergarments. This is it. But the way it closes is that there's a slit in the back piece here, and then the other sort of this tab thing goes through it. They're attached with some ribbon to it, and then you just kind of have to pull as tight as you want. I want a bit more support, so I'm trying to pull it as tightly as possible. But I found it really hard to tighten it enough that I'm happy with it. And I wonder if it would be easier with someone else, but I don't have anyone else at home with me tonight, so I think this will have to do. But I just wanted to show you literally how, I guess, loose it is, because the most defining thing right now is this line at my waist created by this ribbon. Yeah, I mean, I think you can see that the issue is that the tabs in the ribbon only pull on the waist, and this, and the top, has no tension on it, so it doesn't provide a lot of support. It provides some. We're gonna test it out. I find sewing is a really good activity for that because it does require some support, but you're not walking around and moving around. It's it's just sitting. So on to sewing, and I'll come back to you in a couple of hours. Okay, so I've had the corset on for about 3 to 4 hours now, and I just wanted to check in and update you on how I feel about it. Unfortunately, it's not very promising. I had a bit about 2 hours in where I thought, actually, this is not too bad, but then I decided that that was wrong, and it's actually not that great. I think you can kind of see that, like, there's no tension here, there's no tension here, which means that the only tension is at the waist, as I mentioned before. And what I really like from my corsets is back support, and because there's no tension, it really doesn't give me that much back support. So it kind of fails on the main purpose that I want it for. There's one last thing I want to try, which I'm going to assemble really quick and show you and see if it does anything, so PRB. Okay, so the slight improvement I did, I can already feel the difference, and I didn't even actually fully close the corset. So let's have a little look. So what I did, I don't know if you can quite see, is I just pinned a strip of the same tape to the top and to the bottom of the corset, and then connected it to the tab, and I did this on both sides, and you can see immediately there's such a big change on how much slack there is. So I don't think it definitely helps. I'm not sure it gives me all the support that I'm looking for, but this is really reminiscent of like fan lacing, and I think this is a great improvement. So I'm gonna pin the tapes in properly and actually sew them down without just a pin, and I think, look at the difference. I think this is a good fix. And I think that's it for this project. I'm not going to take like fancy photos because this is like more of a common item, I guess, from my wardrobe. This might be a good option for weekends or like slower days when I just need some support. So yeah, overall, I was pretty skeptical of this project when I tried it on, but I'm really glad I finished it because at least I learned something. And I was really intrigued by the design and concept of this corset, so I'm really glad I did try it. I think you can probably, if you are tempted to try something like this, you can probably engineer something that's slightly different to this, because this still is such a strong point of like collapse that it actually digs a little bit into your ribs if you're not careful. So I think there's potential here for sure. Otherwise, I'm just glad I tried a different corset model. If you're new here to my channel, I'm really passionate about corsets, and I'm really interested in trying to find one that really suits my body type and my needs. So this was another step on that long ladder. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this experiment. I think I've learned a lot, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.